to the article that I wrote in the first issue about 10 months ago about the press's slavish acceptance of Ken Starr's leaks in the early weeks of the Monica Lewinsky mess. And we continue to be helped by lots of press, not all of it positive by any means. And ironically, by the fact that many in the advertising community seem to get this new category almost as fast as I try to explain it. Are we going to succeed? Well, the first rap against us was that only journalists cared. And I've got to tell you that I laughed that one off, because when I started Court TV, everybody told me that only lawyers would want to watch a channel that had trials on it. And I said, well, it depends which trials you pick. And today, with a circulation rate base for our new magazine of 225,000, and with growing newsstand sales and steady growth from those obnoxious blow-in cards that you get in magazines, I can tell you that it's no longer an argument about whether people other than journalists care about this stuff. They really do care. All of you really care about the stuff you're putting into your heads. We're nicely on our plan, our business plan, to get to 400,000 to 500,000 subscribers in 5 years. In fact, we're actually a little bit ahead of it. And we already know that our demographics, which advertisers care a lot about, look really good. Our readers are the kinds of sophisticated consumers that advertisers want. Now, we got there by sending all kinds of direct mail to lists of subscribers to other magazines, and we got a very good response. But then the real test was, once you sign people up for this, will they pay up after they get the first issue in a bill? And we had a terrific pay-up rate, much higher than the industry standard, and indeed higher than was in our business plan. So that was good news. And I can report to you today that the initial renewal rates, as we start to get to our first year, look even better than that. So we're doing fine. We're doing better than fine as a business, which means we're hot. Now, how do we stay hot? We hope to stay hot by constantly improving what we do. Someone asked me at the lunch table, you know, am I satisfied with the first issue? And I said that I already hate every issue we've published so far, except the one that just came off the presses a few days ago, and that'll be in your mailboxes in a couple of weeks. And I know that a month from now I'm going to hate that one. We keep tinkering with it. We keep playing with it. We change the mix a little bit. That's what a creative process is all about. Now, there was also some skepticism initially about whether we'd run out of stuff to write about. Not a chance. Especially since, though there wasn't a chance, but that's especially true since our plan was never to be the negative, carping, quote, watchdog, unquote, that the press originally liked to portray us as. Sure, we're writing tough stories about a group of people who make lawyers look absolutely sanguine and gracious when it comes to criticizing them. Now, someone asked me last week, I was speaking at the newspaper editors convention in San Francisco, in a room larger than this, all full of newspaper editors from around the country, and one of them asked me, what's the big difference so far that you can see between writing about lawyers and writing about journalists? And it took me a second to respond. I said, it's real simple. The most tangible difference is that the journalists threaten to sue a lot more. It's true. But not only are we writing stories that are critical, we're also writing all kinds of stories about heroes in journalism. And more important, all kinds of stories that are simply good, and I hope sometimes even great, narratives that fulfill our mission of telling people the who and the how behind everything they're reading, watching, and logging on to. Now, let me give you an example of how we take a different approach in that regard. It begins with a story that I once wrote for New York Magazine. My wife and I, we got married, went on a honeymoon to Italy, and we were completely taken by the fact that when we got into cabs in Rome, we had no idea where we were going. We didn't even understand the currency, whether it was, 2 billion or 2 trillion lira that it took to go, a mile. And there were several occasions where we'd ask a taxi driver to take us somewhere, and he'd get out of the car and point to the place saying we could walk there, or we'd give him too much money and he'd give the money back. So I got this great idea. I got back to New York and I said to my editor at New York Magazine, let's do a story about taxi drivers' honesty in New York, and I can compare it to Rome. And the idea was that my wife and I would get into 10 taxis in New York, posing as French tourists. She speaks French. I took French. She speaks French. We would pose as French tourists and ask the driver to take us someplace that was actually down the block or give him too much money. The same thing has happened in Rome. And we did it. And my editor at New York Magazine said, that's a great idea, we'll do it. And I said, one condition. He said, what's that? I said, if they're honest, we have to do the story too. He said, it's not going to be a problem. Okay. So we did it, and we really did a great job. I think we did a great job. But 9 out of 10 of the cab drivers were totally and completely honest. And I write the story, and he sort of, I come in the next day, looks at the story, says, well, we're not going to run this. I said, yes, we are. I said, and in fact, it's more interesting news than the opposite. Because the most interesting kind of journalism is journalism that actually tells people something that they didn't know and that surprises them. This is kind of surprising. So we did a story, 9 out of 10 New York cab drivers honest. Now we have this rule at our magazine. If we start to do a story because we sniff a scandal or we sniff some wrongdoing, we're always going to report it somehow, even if it turns out that there is no wrongdoing. I'll give you an example. We got a tip from someone that we should look at all the covers of Entertainment Weekly magazine, which is a Time Inc. magazine, because You've Got Mail, a Warner Brothers movie, was on the cover one week. And someone said, if you tally up the number of covers they do where the movies of Warner Brothers movies, it's going to be very interesting. And we went back 2 years and we did tally it up, and it was very interesting. Warner Brothers was underrepresented among the studios on the covers of Entertainment Weekly. And that's what we reported in our magazine. Now, that drives some of our subscribers who are total conspiracy nuts crazy. I mean, there are a certain number of people who subscribe to this magazine because they think all big corporations are terrible, or because they think the media is too biased on the left or too biased on the right. We lost subscribers in our first issue because we said something bad about Ken Starr. We lost subscribers last issue because we said that the press had been unfair to Jerry Falwell in that story about the stuffed animal or something. People who expect us to be predictable and expect us to knee-jerkingly take one side or another are disappointed. Everybody else thinks, I think, that we're handling it the way we should, which is we're being straight about everything. So that's one of our approaches to the magazine, which is we happily report good news as well as bad news. We're also providing, I think, all kinds of service, just pure service about the information age, particularly with regard to how to find and use the best websites, deal with the kind of sensory overload that we all face from everything that's coming at us. And we always try to apply basic standards to this stuff, such as whether the stuff is true. We're starting in our next issue a new kind of book review. Instead of a book review talking about how eloquent and wonderful and evocative the book is, we're talking about nonfiction books, we're going to take a crack at figuring out whether the book is true or not. Not a bad idea, it seems to me, if you're reviewing a nonfiction book. And that's our kind of approach. The first approach is the stuff true, and is it fair? And we hope with that kind of book review literally go back to sources and say, did you say what this author says you said? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the author's not telling the truth and the source is, but we intend to try to get to the bottom of some of that. We're also in the midst of dramatically expanding what we do on the web. And one feature we hope to get a lot of activity is something we call the complaint board. What we want people and corporations, especially corporations, to do, who feel wronged about a story, is to send us a very detailed complaint that we will post, and we will then go to the media entity and get a response. This, I think, changes the nature of one of the things that must frustrate a lot of people in this audience, which is newspaper or magazine or television news organization does a story about you or your company, and you write a 6-page letter detailing exactly what's wrong. You huff and you puff and you write this 6-page letter, And then it depends on whether the editor is in a good mood or not, whether he prints one paragraph of it, or he prints 2 truncated paragraphs instead of your 6 pages, or he prints nothing. Well, now that's not the end of the story. We want you to come to us, because we'll print that letter. We'll print it on the web at least, and if it's really good, we'll put it in the magazine, and we'll go get a response. We don't think the conversation should end when the editor decides, I'm not printing your letter. We think that should be the beginning of the conversation. We hope to change the way the rules are. We hope to change the way this game is played. Now, as we continue to grow, we hope to focus also on some of the larger issues that all of us in this room have to grapple with when it comes to journalism. For example, our editor, Eric Efron, has a column in the last issue that raises the question